Well, for more on the Middle East, as well as the Trump-Putin summit, let's bring in John Bolton. He's a former national security advisor serving under President Trump's first term. He's also a former U.S. ambassador to the UN. Ambassador Bolton, welcome to the program. So let's start in the Middle East. Obviously, it's been a few days now since Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Israel will now be taking over Gaza City in its attempt to squeeze Hamas and perhaps even full control over the enclave. Its goals to defeat all of Hamas and bring the hostages home. That has sparked condemnation from a number of countries, including Israel's allies. President Trump, on the other hand, says that whatever Prime Minister Netanyahu decides to do is up to him. What do you make of the U.S. position as it relates to the war in Gaza right now?
Well, I think it's the correct position. I think Israel said shortly after October the 7th that its objective in Gaza was the elimination of Hamas as a military and political force. And I think until that objective is achieved, the conditions for any improvement in Gaza, any kind of stability, any kind of long-term planning simply don't exist. It's like saying, well, you've got cancer and what we're going to do is operate and we'll take out 90% of the cancer and we'll leave the other 10%. What do you think is going to happen if you do that? So it's a long, difficult process, but given the brutality that Hamas has shown with its own citizens throughout this conflict, using them as human shields and for propaganda purposes and anything else that suits Hamas's survival, I think that's where we are.
Do you think that given the pushback that Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing, not only from international countries and capitals, but also from some of his former military chiefs, and it looks like even his current chief of staff may be perhaps being pressured to do something that he says he doesn't think is in Israel's best interest or the IDF's best interest? Do you think this exhibits perhaps Netanyahu just trying to put additional pressure on Hamas, or nonetheless, do you actually think that this plan to take over the entirety of the enclave is what we're about to see unfold?
Well, it certainly seems to be moving in that direction. I mean, I think a lot of the military, former and current officers simply don't have the political appreciation that to win the war, you need to win the war. You know, certainly it's not something that the U.S. at least finds unusual. In World War II, we expected unconditional surrender from Nazi Germany and unconditional surrender from Imperial Japan.
Ambassador Bolton, I'm just going to put us on pause for a second. The president is speaking now on these conversations with Vladimir Putin coming up on Friday. I want to get your reaction after.
No, it was always going to be, I was going to meet with President Putin, and then after that, I'm going to call the leaders and President Zelenskyy. I'm going to call President Zelenskyy, and then I'll call, probably in that order, the leaders. There's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting, which will be more productive than the first, because the first is I'm going to find out where we are and what we're doing. Again, this is Biden's war. This isn't my war. He got us into this thing, and it should have never happened. This war would have never happened if I were president. But it is what it is, and I'm here to fix it, and I'm here to stop 6,000, 7,000 people last week. 7,213 people last week were killed, mostly soldiers. But missiles being lobbed into towns don't exactly help either, but mostly soldiers. And Ukrainian and Russian, they're not American soldiers, but you know, if we can save a lot of lives, it would be a great thing. I've stopped 5 wars in the last 6 months. And on top of that, we wiped out the nuclear capability of Iran, obliterated it. It's turned out to be a correct word, by the way, because, you know, some of the press said, well, maybe it wasn't obliteration. It was obliteration. We're going to meet with, I would say, the second meeting. If the first one goes okay, we'll have a quick second one. I would like to do it almost immediately. And we'll have a quick second meeting between President Putin and President Zelenskyy and myself, if they'd like to have me there. And that would be a meeting where maybe it could be absolutely work. But the first meeting will not work that out. Certain great things can be gained in the first. It's going to be a very important meeting. But it's setting the table for the second meeting. I think the second meeting, if the second meeting takes place, now there may be no second meeting, because if I feel that it's not appropriate to have it because I didn't get the answers that we have to have, then we're not going to have a second meeting.
All right, let's bring in Ambassador Bolton to respond to what we heard from President Trump, really tempering expectations going into this meeting on Friday, which raises the question of why this couldn't have been done over the phone if now the focus would be on a potential second meeting between President Trump and President Zelenskyy, and perhaps even President Trump. Your reaction?
Well, honestly, that's what I thought the arrangement was to begin with, that there'd first be a meeting between Putin and Trump, and then a second meeting among the three of them, including Zelenskyy. I think there was confusion, but in some circles, but it still looks like the same schedule we heard about originally. The question is what Trump really thinks is going to happen in terms of the likelihood of success of a ceasefire effort. I think what he's saying is, if I think that I can contribute to a ceasefire and get the Nobel Peace Prize, then I'll exert the time and energy necessary to do it. But if I don't, then I'm pulling out. Maybe that means sanctions on Russia. Maybe it means aid to Ukraine. Maybe it just means he gives up paying any attention to the situation. It emerges just as murky, I think, as it was beforehand on that point.
Well, President Trump seems to really pay attention to how the media, you know this more than most, how the media covers these types of negotiations and deals. He once again noted and chided the media there for its coverage of the U.S. participating with Israel in its war in Iran. But this morning, I'm sure you're aware of this as well, he took to social media to criticize the media's coverage of this upcoming summit with Vladimir Putin, and specifically raised your name and said that those in the unfair media, they're at work against his meeting with President Putin, and constantly quoting fired losers and really dumb people like John Bolton, who just said that even though the meeting is on American soil, Putin has already won. What's that all about? We're winning on everything. This isn't the first time he's attacked you on social media, but what do you make of this specific post?
Well, I'm glad I'm still on his mind. Look, I think he recognizes that this meeting may have been set up too hastily. You know, there's been a fair amount of reporting that Steve Witkoff didn't understand what Putin told him about the Russian peace plan. And yet this summit, which I think has been convened and scheduled and is about to be held faster than any summit of comparable leaders in contemporary history, may have been based on Steve Witkoff's misunderstanding of what Putin was actually up to. So if things are not what Witkoff reported back, it's certainly in Trump's interest to say, I'm just going to go and listen. I'll decide in 2 minutes. It could be a short summit if that's all he's going to do. I don't think it'll turn out that way, but I think he's nervous, perhaps, that he jumped too soon to set this summit up.
At this point, I talked about it with my Russia guest in the last hour. It seems like everyone has something to lose from this meeting except for Vladimir Putin. I don't know if you agree with that, but if Putin walks away with nothing, he's still garnered global attention and recognition, coming to the United States for the first time since his second larger-scale illegal invasion of Ukraine. And President Trump could lose face here by Russia, as we know, continuing, in fact, advancing its bombardment on the battlefield and against civilians in Ukraine. And of course, Vladimir Zelenskyy has the most at risk here. So what is your interpretation of what's at stake for Putin?
Well, I think the direction of travel for Putin is still pretty positive. He's got a meeting. He's got legitimacy. He's going to stand in the center of world attention, shaking hands with the President of the United States. It's a picture that will be on the front page of every newspaper in the world the day after it. He's succeeded in keeping Zelenskyy and the Europeans and others out. So it will just be a one-on-one with Trump and a one-on-one U.S.-Russia meeting. And I think this is important because I think Putin's objective here is to reel Trump back in. I think he sees that for intentionally or otherwise, he pushed through the envelope of Trump's friendship with him. That at least is how Trump characterizes it. and he's going to apply his KGB training to try and reel Trump back in and convince him that, in fact, he is serious about peace, although I don't think he is, but he's going to try and convince Trump of that, and hope to make Trump as much an advocate for his plan as he can. Now, there's no guarantee of success there, but he has the first mover advantage. I mean, this call they just had with Zelenskyy and the European leaders, a virtual call for an hour, doesn't compare to what's going to happen in Anchorage on Friday.
Quickly, if you were a betting man, what are the odds, you think, of this second meeting between President Trump and President Zelenskyy directly?
Well, I think it depends on whether Putin can work his magic again and get Trump back into line. If so, a huge victory for Putin. I think the most likely outcome is that it's very inconclusive, and it's going to be open to question whether there will be a second meeting.
All right, we'll be watching it all unfold. John Bolton, living free in the president's mind, as always. Thank you so much. Rent-free there.